I grew up in a haunted house. Ever since I can remember, we had activity in the house. But whenever we played with the Ouija board, things got really crazy. When I was around 6 or 7, we were playing with the board, my whole family. This board hated my dad and said that it couldn't touch him, so it was going to kill me and my older sister. We asked why it couldn't touch my dad, and it said Christopher. It took my mom and dad a few minutes to figure out what it actually said. My dad always wore a blessed St. Christopher's medal, and that's the reason why it couldn't touch him. It then went into detail on how it was going to kill me and my sister. It said it was going to hang my sister on the wall next to the bathroom, so he would see her when he got up for work. It said it was going to stab me through the chest to the wall by the phone in the kitchen, so when he ran downstairs to call for help, he would find me dead as well. I was so scared that I went into shock and just started running around the kitchen table crying. Now, all 4 of us kids were old enough to read. My dad has never cursed in front of us, ever. This board would curse him out every time. There is no way my parents would ever say stuff like that to us. That's just one story that really sticks out to me for obvious reasons. This story starts on a Sunday during football season of 2007. We were all at my brother's to enjoy the games. The Eagles had a 4:25 kickoff. I left a little before 4 to get home in time for the game. My parents were staying overnight at my brother's. My uncle, who lived with us at the time, went into the hospital that Friday for a new pacemaker. Routine in and out procedure, and was coming home the next day, Monday. From the very second I walked in the door, it felt heavy, and that I wasn't alone in the house. This disturbed me, and I guess scared me a little too. I ran up the steps and to my bedroom to watch the game. As I was lying there, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was in the house. So I went and checked every room, including the basement. Nothing. I was alone. I went back to watch the game. It was then I got the feeling that something was staring at me from the corner of my room, but up at the ceiling. I had been ghost hunting for a few years, and I thought the best thing to do was just try to ignore it. Try not to give it any power, and it will go away. So this thing kept staring at me, and then I heard it start walking across my floor to my bed, and then back to the corner by my door. And I'm thinking, am I really hearing what I think I'm hearing? So I was slowly turning down the volume to my TV to listen, all the while pretending not to pay attention to it. It kept pacing back and forth, staring at me with all the hate for me in the world. This thing hated my guts and wanted me out of the house. So I pick up my phone and call my girlfriend. I whisper to her that there is something in my room. She tells me to get out and go back to my brother's. I tell her no, this thing is not chasing me from my home. I hang up with her. The next thing I know is my mom calls me, and she told me my girlfriend called her and told her what was going on and told me to get out of there. I tell her the same thing. No. I ask her where her holy water was, and she told me it's in her top right corner of her dresser. So I go get it. This thing followed me down the hall and into her room, just staring me down with hate. I grab the holy water and run out of her room, slamming the door behind me. Run into my room, slam the door closed. I sit with my back against the wall, looking at my door with the holy water in my hand. I got my back against the wall that separated my room from my parents' room, just waiting for that thing to come back in my room. All of a sudden, this scratching sound comes from the inside the wall by my right ear. Then this thing punches the wall right behind my head. I jump from my bed to my door, about 7 feet, and take off downstairs. Before I even knew it, this thing was behind me, just staring at me. It wanted me gone. I go down the basement one more time to check and make sure nobody else was in the house because I still couldn't shake that feeling that someone else was in the house. The whole house felt heavy. I can't really explain it better than this. If you ever went somewhere where you weren't supposed to be, and you know you're not supposed to be there, that's what it felt like. Well, anyway, this thing followed me to the basement and then back up to the living room. Now, all of this has taken place over a few hours, and I started getting mad. I turned and just yelled at this thing that I wasn't leaving. This is my house, and you're not running me out of it. I just kept yelling at it to get out, and I'm not leaving. Over the course of about half an hour, the heaviness and the feeling that I wasn't alone slowly went away. I called my girlfriend and mom and told them that everything was good now. I just want to make 2 points here. First, I never saw anything. It was just the feeling of a presence, a feeling of being stared at, and the feeling that this thing hated me. The second point is, I was afraid to use the holy water because I thought it would only make this thing even more mad at me. The next day at work, my mom called me and gave me the sad news that my uncle passed away Sunday night, about the time all this was happening. After weeks of going over this in my mind a million times, I came to the conclusion that this was the angel of death looking for my uncle. He wasn't there, but I was. I was still in high school at this time. We were talking to a spirit who called himself Vampire. He said he was a serial killer, and the police gave him the nickname Vampire because he would slit girls' throats. I would go back and forth with this spirit, and me being a smartass would always make fun of it. At this time, there was a girl who lived down the street from me, and she claimed that she could use the board all by herself. I told her, no way that's possible. You need 2 people. So I went to her house one night, and we sat on her step, and she got out the board. Right away, this spirit Vampire comes through. Now, I never told her about him, but somehow he started talking to us. I still don't believe her, and I think, well, maybe one of my sisters or my brother told her about Vampire. So I start cursing it, and it starts cursing me, and then it says, you know what? I'm going to kill you tonight while you sleep. I just keep making fun of it, and I say the joke's on you. You don't know where I'm sleeping tonight. A few minutes go by of him cursing me and me cursing him, and he says, by the way, you are sleeping on your sister's floor because of the air conditioner. I will tell you there were only 2 people on this earth who knew that, me and my sister. I had only asked her a second before I walked out the door to go to this girl's house, which was only 4 doors down the street. There was no way she could have known that. Well, that got my attention and scared the life right out of me. Scared me so bad I didn't go home that night. I slept at the girl's house. So the next morning, I come in the back door and my mom is there doing dishes. She asked me where I was all night and I told her the whole story. It was nice and sunny and now I wasn't afraid and we had a good laugh about it. The washer was empty, so I figured it was the best time to do my wash while my brother and sisters were still sleeping. So I get my clothes and I go down to the basement, and before I even start the washer, my mom yells down jokingly, watch out, Vampire doesn't get you. So it's daytime and I'm feeling brave and I put my hands up and yell, Vampire, come and get me. A second later, all these boxes and things just start falling behind me. I take off running and ended up staying the next few nights at my cousin's house. At this time, my bedroom was in the basement, and I was still in high school. I was sleeping, and I felt someone put their hand on my shoulder and shake me. I pushed their hand away, and again, they put their hand on my shoulder to wake me up. This happens a couple more times. I turn around and say, what do you want? Standing there is this tall, dark shadow, blacker than black. He says to me, you have to do me a favor. He turns and points to a chair and says, you have to take this upstairs for me. I was mad because he woke me from sleeping, but I knew he wouldn't leave me alone until I did what he asked. So I took the chair up to the kitchen. It took me 20 to 30 minutes to get the chair through the basement door. When I finally got the chair in the kitchen, I went to use the bathroom. Coming back through the kitchen, I saw the chair and I couldn't remember why I brought it up. The next morning, I'm woken up by my mom calling my name. I thought I overslept for school and jumped out of bed. She was calling for me to come upstairs. When I get up to the kitchen, she asked, "How did this chair get up here?" I said, "Some man asked me to bring it up." We agreed that my grandfather just wanted a seat at the kitchen table. The chair stayed in the kitchen till we moved out of the house years later. That was the one and only time I saw my grandfather, but I wasn't the only one to see him through the years. My mom needed to get something out of her room. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw someone dressed in gray go into the middle bedroom. She thought that my brother had snuck up the stairs behind her and was going to jump out of the middle bedroom and scare her. She thought I'm going to scare him instead, so she sneaks to the door and jumps, looking to the middle room, and says, "Gotcha!" Turns out the middle room door was closed, and she opened it and no one was in there. She never heard the door open or close. The man dressed all in gray walked right through the door. She ran down the steps as fast as she could. My oldest sister was pregnant with her oldest and was close to her due date. Her husband had to go away for 2 weeks for the reserves, so my parents told her to come sleep at our house for the 2 weeks, just in case. My parents gave her their bedroom, and they slept downstairs. In the middle of the night, she comes to my room and wakes me up and says that she just saw something in my parents' room. I looked at her, and she was as white as a ghost. I looked at the clock and told her to leave me alone because I had to get up early for work. I fell back to sleep, only to be woken up a few minutes later by my mom and dad sneaking up the steps but looking back towards their room. I knew instantly that something creepy happened and was wide awake now. My sister was just lying there in bed when she felt something sit on the bed. Thinking it was my cat, she tried scooting it off the bed with her foot. She was on her right side when she got the feeling someone was staring at her. She slowly turned around and came face to face with my grandfather, who was dead for about 20 years at the time. She went into shock, and that's when she came to wake me up. We all stayed awake downstairs, keeping an eye on the steps and watching for shadows in the hallway, because ever since I was a little kid, we could hear him walking up and down the hallway at night, just keeping an eye on us, I guess. Me and my brother had the middle bedroom, and our closet and my mom and dad's closet were connected, separated by a thin piece of wood that wasn't even attached. It was just freestanding. One night, my dad comes home from work, and he goes upstairs to take a shower before dinner. As he is passing our room, he sees a light on their side of the closet. The light is shining through and around the thin piece of wood. He says down the steps, "When did we get a light in the closet?" My mom comes running upstairs and sees the light on and says, "Oh my God." My dad put that light in and it never worked. So my dad reaches in and shuts the light off. The next night, same thing. He goes up to shower and the light is on again. Again, he says down the steps, "Ha ha, very funny. Are you trying to scare me?" My mom comes up and says she didn't turn it on. My dad saw the look on her face and knew she was telling the truth. He shuts the light off, takes the bulb out, and says if it comes on again, we are moving. The owner of the house that my grandma was renting sold the house and she had to move. There was a 2-week gap before she could move into a new apartment, so she moved in with my mom and dad for 2 weeks. All of us kids had moved out at this time, and it was just the 3 of them. The 2 weeks go by and it's moving day. I was the only one who showed up to do the moving. It was really no big deal because it was mostly just boxes of personal stuff and clothes and stuff like that. It would only take 3 or 4 trips to move them. She was also getting furniture delivered that day, and my dad stayed at the apartment while me, my mom, and my grandma went back for the last load. There were only a handful of boxes left in the basement to get. They waited outside and I ran down to grab a couple. I say out loud, "Hey, Grandpop, how did you like Grandma being in the house for 2 weeks?" Just then the lights in the back of the basement went out. I ran up and out of the house. I said, "There are a couple of boxes left, but I'm not going back down there." I told them what happened, and we all agreed to just leave the last few boxes. Now, I should add, my grandfather died in the house. After he died, my grandma sold the house to my mom and dad. Even though we lived in a haunted house, my brother refused to believe it. He denied it at every incident. For whatever reason, my grandfather didn't like non-believers. He would make you a believer. Late one night, my brother was talking to his girlfriend, now his wife, on the phone. They were talking about how her ex-boyfriend's mother just died, and she was hoping that she wouldn't come back and haunt her. Just then, the phone went dead, the lights went out, and this little Winnie the Pooh squeaky toy comes flying out from behind the couch and hits the wall next to my brother's head with a loud squeak. He became a believer after that. Like I said before, my grandfather would make you a believer. My sister's boyfriend, now her husband, moved in with us while he was still in the Navy. He didn't believe any of the stories we told him about the haunting. He would just laugh at us. One day, he was doing wash. He went down the basement to take his clothes out of the washer and put them in the dryer. Next thing we know, he comes running up the stairs. He was scared. He said, "Okay, who did it? I know you're trying to scare me." We told him we have no idea what he is talking about. He tells us that when he went down into the basement, someone or something had poured laundry detergent in the cup for his next load, and it was just sitting there on the washing machine waiting for him. This didn't convince him the house was haunted. A couple of days later, he's in the shower. He said that the shower curtain started coming at him as if someone was using their pointer finger to push it. He opened the shower curtain and no one was there. That's when he became a believer. Me and my brother's bedroom was in the basement at this time. One day my brother was in the room and a rock hits him in the back. He turns around and there's a mouse on the ledge just looking at him. He swears to this day that the mouse threw the rock and not a ghost. Another quick story of a strange event that happened at the time we were playing with the Ouija board. We had just gotten new carpet, and you know how you can go against the grain of the rug and draw on it? Well, one night my mom and dad were watching TV, and my dad just happened to look down at the rug, and there was a human-looking body being drawn in the rug. He said to my mom, "Do you see that?" She saw it being drawn as well. Then around the body were triangles circling the body. Then it just disappeared. Very strange activity when messing with the Ouija board. I can't explain that one. I was just out of high school, and we were talking to a spirit who said it was my grandfather. We had been talking for weeks, and it really convinced me that it was him. Eventually, it gave us a chant to say to release the spirit from the board. It really wanted me to say the chant. I was still a little hesitant, and it said something to me that I always believed but never told anyone. My grandfather died 2 weeks before I turned 1, and I always believed he loved me the most out of all of his grandchildren because I was the baby of the family at the time. I never told anyone that, and this spirit says to me, and by the way, I wasn't on the board at the time. 2 other people were. It says to me, "You know you were my favorite. Please release me from this board." This shocked me, and I guess I took too long to say the chant, and it just went off on me, cursing me and threatening to kill me if I didn't release it from the board. It was at that time my dad walked into the living room with his hand behind his back and asked the board, "What do I have in my hand?" Now remember, this board hated my dad. It starts to say, "You keep that effing thing away from me, you mother effer." None of us knew what he had, and he showed what it was. It was a bottle of holy water. My dad put it on the board but didn't let go of it. The pointer started hitting the bottle in his hand, trying to get it off. Then it started spelling, it burns, over and over. We stopped playing with it after that. Took a long break before we ever played with it again. I was really close to saying the chant because I really believed it was my grandfather. This story happened a few days before the last one. This spirit kept saying it was my grandfather, and we brought my grandmom over to confirm info or flat out say it's lying. It was giving us info that was true, but my grandma still didn't believe. My mom and sister were on the board, and my grandma asked if you were really my husband, when was our marriage blessed? My mom and sister never even knew that their marriage was blessed, but this thing knew the exact date. My grandma started crying and got up and asked me to drive her home. The Ouija board is not a game. No one should ever use one. These spirits that come through mix lies and truths to convince you they are something they're not. I don't know how they know the things they know, but they only use it for evil.